I am maniacal when it comes to preparation.
Mm.
At my church, I used to be given 3 minutes for offering. I would plan 1 month for that 3 minutes. I would make sure that 3 minutes was the best 3 minutes somebody had ever had in a church experience in their life. And I thought, I've been given 3 minutes. And so I'm not an opportunist, I'm a stewardess.
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. So glad you joined us. And today, if you ever wonder how people get to the top quick, we're going to talk about that with Ryan Leak. I met him just over a decade ago. We had dinner. Nobody knew who he was. Today, he's on the top stages, top companies, top churches in the world. How does that happen? He talks about maniacal preparation and what you need to do to really succeed. I think you're going to find this absolutely fascinating. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, maybe like and comment on this episode, and we'll get right into it with Ryan. But first, a word from today's carefully selected podcast partners. Today's episode is brought to you by Compassion. So I want to ask you a question. Do you consider yourself a compassionate person? Like, does the suffering of other people actually move you to take action? Well, did you know that research shows a measurable link between authentic compassion and an improvement in personal health and professional success? In fact, data shows that ongoing acts of kindness toward others is directly linked to living a longer life and achieving greater professional success. Now, that's pretty compelling data, and it points to something a lot larger than just ourselves. You know, Scripture shows us many examples of God's compassion toward us, most evidently in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And as a pastor, I really want to see all people accept God's compassion toward us and live a life of gospel-driven impact as a result. So if you also desire this, here's what I'd love for you to do. I'd encourage you to visit my friends at Compassion International and begin learning how you can grow your compassion today. Find out more at compassion.com/Carey. Again, that is compassion.com/Carey. I'm on this mission, and I'd love for you to join me too. Today's episode is brought to you by Glue. You know, as a pastor, we all know that fall's a really big season. People come back from summer vacation. It's time to re-engage your church. So how do you prepare now to lead well then? Well, Brad Hill from Glue is here to talk about a simple, powerful way to do that. Brad, what do you suggest?
Yeah, Carey, this is where something called the Church Health Dashboard comes in. This is new. It's part of the Insight Suite on Glue. And what it's going to do is help you know how the people are doing in your community across these key dimensions like spiritual, relationships, and financial health. And it helps you plan the right messages, right? The right programs, how you're going to preach, what are your invitations this fall? It's all linked up with the Church Pulse assessment from Barna and Glue. And it makes it very easy to engage every person in your church so they can participate. Wouldn't it be great if this fall you could take the guesswork out of making some of these most important ministry decisions and know exactly how your people are doing? So the Church Health Dashboard is going to give you these insights to lead well into the fall and even beyond.
Well, the thing I love about that is you can know ahead of time where you need to go by using that. You don't have to guess, right? So you can visit stateofthechurch.com/Carey to launch your congregation's church pulse and lead your church into the next season with clarity and intention. Ryan, it's good to finally have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much, man. It is an absolute honor. I am a massive fan of yours, and I have to say the best book that I have read in the last 10 years was Didn't See It Coming.
No way.
100%.
Really? What? Okay.
I tell everybody that. I'm like, I'm like, everybody should be reading this book.
Okay.
Massive.
That surprised me. And so listeners, please don't tune out. But I'm going to ask, what resonated with that? Because that was like 7 years ago.
I know.
And I keep hearing people, I've heard it prescribed at seminaries. Every first-year student has to read this.
It's brilliant.
People give it out to their teams. It's like every new staff have to hear it. What resonated? Because it was 7 character issues, right? That came up.
No, I think the way that you laid out the book, the way you set up the subject, I think it's a masterclass on writing.
Thank you.
The clarity. And honestly, I can't tell you how many people I sit with that didn't see irrelevance coming.
Irrelevance. Yeah.
They just didn't see it. They just didn't see it. And I can't tell you how many people I'm like, you gotta, like people go, hey, what's your favorite book? What's the book I need to read? I'm like, dude, didn't see it coming. Didn't see it coming. Like, who wrote these? Didn't see it coming. I'm like, I'm telling you, you gotta go get Didn't See It Coming. It is sensational. And it is just so, I mean, it's just so practical. I could go on and on and on. This is just your podcast and I'm not interviewing you, but I could.
Well,
easily,
we'll leave it there. But you know what? You've had, and I wrote it for people who find themselves in leadership. And it's like, well, I knew I was going to have to lead a team. I knew I had to do this. But all this other stuff, like I'm irrelevant before I know it, that's accelerated since the book. Cynicism,
absolutely,
character compromise, all that stuff, right? Platform 100%. Puts pressure on you. And few people, we were talking about this before we hit record. I sat at a dinner with you with a mutual friend. We think maybe it was 10 years ago or so, maybe 11 years ago. Yeah. And you had just gone viral over your wedding proposal.
That's right.
But what has happened to you? I mean, it's been a meteoric rise for Ryan Leak. And so I want to talk about that. You know, you went from literally selling shoes at a mall to speaking to Fortune 100 executives and one of the most sought after speakers in leadership, but also a preacher in the church as well, who does a lot of guest teaching. Can you walk us through the journey and some of the key inflection points?
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor at a small African Methodist Episcopal church, which for our listeners that don't know what that means, just a black church. Okay. And then in 5th grade, he suffered a stroke. And I was already attending a private school that was connected to a very large Assemblies of God church, which was predominantly white. And so I went from small black church to large white church. I went from 3-hour-long services to 1-hour-long services. And so I had this interesting emergency break of just like, whoa, church is different. I'm going to church with my friends. And I started to see things just a little bit different. Learned a lot about leadership during that season. And I noticed that in both churches, they made an impact on people's lives, specifically on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights. And it was probably my senior year in high school that I thought, what if I could make a difference in somebody's life on a Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday? And so I went to a Christian school and got a business degree. So I never had my eyes set on specifically being in ministry, but always had a heart for it. But I had a business mind. And so inevitably, fresh out of college, I started teaching at churches because that was what most of my network was. And I'll never forget, I was preaching in San Francisco and a CMO was in the audience and she said, Ryan's the best message I've ever heard. And I work for a federal credit union across the street. And I think if our staff heard that message, we'd be the best place to work in the city. I said, oh, okay. She goes, would you come and do that message, but you can't use the verses? And I'm like, I mean, I guess I can figure it out. And then she goes, you think you can do an all-day seminar? I have no idea to this day why I said yes, but for some odd reason.
And how old were you at the time?
Oh, not my goodness. I was 27.
Yeah.
Had never done a corporate keynote in my life, let alone an all-day seminar. And so I went and, put together an 8-hour day of exercises and we kind of built it together. And then from that point on, I started sharing stories in church about how I think we can make an impact in corporate environments. In fact, I think every Christian will spend most of their life at work. And so if we can train people to be able to share their faith where they're going to spend most of their time, it actually changed how I teach the gospel altogether. And I use a lot of work examples. And so I started saying, instead of you need to forgive your dad, I started saying you need to forgive your boss. And I started to notice that it resonated with people and people's companies started bringing me in more and more and more and more. And it just kind of built from there.
What were some inflection points along the way, though? Because I remember from that dinner a decade ago to Fortune 100 to the GLS, like in front of 250,000 people or however many people at the GLS, literally to one of the most sought after speakers today. I'd love to know, were there a couple of takeoff points or there was that one CMO sitting in the crowd? What else happened? Because, one of the reasons I'm asking, A, I'm curious. B, I get, like you probably get even more so, lots of young leaders going, how do I break through? How do I get heard among the noise? You got heard among the noise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think a couple of things happened. Orange Conference was one of those. At that table that you and I met at 10 years ago, I remember our mutual friend saying, hey, I'm going to give you 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought, 7 minutes? I'm going to fly to Atlanta for 7 minutes? Like, that was my first response. Like, why am I'm not flying to Atlanta for 7 minutes.
True. Uh-huh.
And then it's just like, but Ryan, if you've been given 7 minutes, just do a great job with the 7 minutes that you've been given. Yeah. So I flew to Atlanta and I did 7 minutes. Here's what's funny. After that 7 minutes, our mutual friend called another mutual friend named Andy Stanley and said, hey, let me just tell you what a kid just did in 7 minutes at Orange Conference. And then I went from 7 minutes there to 45 minutes at North Point Community Church.
There you go.
And there was a real estate brokerage owner who was in the audience, who also had me speak at their company. The Dallas Mavericks were at a church and heard me, and then they had me come speak at their company. That led to several NBA opportunities. I think part of it is just having a consistency of messaging and excellence that you bring. I also think it's really how you treat people along that journey. And so I today I do 120 events a year, which means I do about 120 pre-event calls. So I'm talking to companies every single day about their challenges, their hiccups, and I'm also asking them, hey, who's the best speaker you've ever heard and why? Who's the worst speaker you've ever had and why? Because I want to learn from both. And so when you do that, what you begin to learn is, well, if you learn a lot from the worst speakers, I've learned more from the worst speakers than I have the best speakers, because you go, this is what you don't do. And all of the stories of the worst speakers had nothing to do with what they said on stage.
What did it have to do?
How they
What
treated
a great question to ask. How they make people feel.
How they treated people. I literally just got off of a pre-event call before this podcast recording. I asked them that question. And I said, who's the worst speaker you've ever had? And they didn't even say the name. They said it was this guy, and he just berated our AV team.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, what are you talking about?
Speaker 101, make friends with the AV team.
Yeah,
Holy cow.
It's like they don't even remember what he said because they tuned it out because of how they treated people. And then I did another pre-event call after that. And they said, Ryan, we can't wait for you to make a video for our people because, man, I don't know what it is, but on video, I just want to be your friend. I was like, oh, I want to be your friend. And so it has nothing to do with what I've said on stage. It's how you make people feel long before you ever even get on stage that I think builds relationships over time. And I think you've got to have a message that truly solves people's problems and how you carry yourself. So I think those are all important things if you're trying to break through the noise.
All right. Now you got me curious. So those 7 minutes, and lots of people have been given 7 minutes. Now that was in front of 8,000 people or however many thousand it was. It was a lot of people. But I have seen so many people platformed in big arenas for a few minutes, and that's it. It's over. And, our mutual friend, Reggie Joyner, people are wondering, has had platformed dozens and dozens of people, including me, over the years. Sure. And most of them, that's it. You never hear from them again. Or they go on to do something else.
Yeah.
How did you leverage those 7 minutes? What did you do to make sure that those were the best 7 minutes that you could bring at that time with your skill set?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I am maniacal when it comes to preparation. At my church, I used to be given 3 minutes for offering. I would plan 1 month for that 3 minutes. I would make sure that 3 minutes was the best 3 minutes somebody had ever had in a church experience in their life. I treated it like it was Catalyst. I treated it like it was Orange Conference. And people would tell me often, they go, I think offering was better than the message. And I would just kind of smile, and not in an arrogant way, but I would say, yeah, because I prepared for it. So like I dialed in jokes, stories, and I thought I've been given 3 minutes. And so I'm not an opportunist, I'm a stewardess. Like I steward the opportunity. If you give me the opportunity, the way I see it, somebody, no matter what event I'm doing, somebody has put their name on the line for me. For Orange, it was Sam Collier.
Mm-hmm.
Sam said, "Hey, Reggie, I want to introduce you to my friend."
Oh, it was Sam.
Ryan.
That's okay. There's the connection. Yeah.
And so in my mind, in that 7 minutes, I go, I'm going to make Sam look good today. Because Sam has introduced a lot of people to Reggie Joiner.
Yep. Yeah.
But I want to be the one that Reggie goes, "Hey, Sam, great intro."
Mm-hmm.
And I have that times 120 every single.
From CMO to CEO to pastor to pastor.
It doesn't matter who it is. If you introduce me, I'm going to make you look good. Like that's my mindset. It's always a Super Bowl. If it's 3 minutes, 20, 60 minutes, everything's a Super Bowl. Some people are like, "Man, I saw you at GLS. Man, congratulations." I'm like, that's great. I can't tell you how many events I do. It's always somebody's Super Bowl. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you're speaking at NADA." What's NADA? I don't know what NADA is. You're speaking at PCMA. You're speaking at FICP. On my calendar,
all the
I have
acronyms.
a bunch of acronyms, just acronyms for days. And guess what they all are? Super Bowls for somebody.
Wow.
And somebody's put their name on the line for me. And so I think my preparation is absolutely maniacal. And it's been that way for over a decade. So with that 7 minutes, I thought, I am going to crush it as best to my ability with the 7 minutes I've been given. And I want to be able to get the plane off the ground, and I want to give it a nice soft landing. I want people to be inspired. I want it to be memorable. And I think naturally I'm a storyteller, and I've got some charisma that I think can make things a little bit more exciting than normal. But I'm maniacal on the preparation.
Let's break it down to something not maybe the vast majority, but a lot of people listening to this can relate to. The 3-minute offering or announcement window.
Oh yeah.
You're given 3 minutes to do, let's pick up the offering. How do you prepare for a month for that? What goes into that?
So a couple of things. One, you think about what are some people's hurdles to giving. They don't trust pastors. They don't trust what we're going to do with the money. They could think that we've got a private plane. I like to address the elephant in the room. I may say something like, "Oh, and by the way, there's no private planes here. I flew Southwest Group B yesterday." You see, immediately it's just like, "Oh, okay. Now I've disarmed you." Does that make sense? If it was a couple of weeks ago, I would say, "Hey, I flew upside down Delta last week." Everybody would laugh. Does that make so? Immediately you're like, okay, this guy isn't like the other guys that we think. So you immediately disarm people, and then you're looking for a verse that isn't Malachi chapter 3. You're looking for something in the scripture that is peculiar. It's not unique. It's in the Bible. It's been there for thousands of years. So it's not like you're going to find a verse no one's ever seen. But if you're looking for something that has challenged you personally, whether it's a life verse, a moment, for me, I had a moment in that church where I was sitting in the balcony, hesitant to give, and was paycheck to paycheck, and said, "God, I trust you." And man, I just had a crazy breakthrough that happened in my life from just trusting God with my finances. And so I think you're always trying to pull from some personal experience. You're trying to have some humor. You're also trying to point to something within that organization that actually has impacted a life that week. So part of that prep too isn't just the scripture and just your humor. It's also calling the community pastor. "Hey, what did we do this week? What impact have we actually had?" Not just a testimonial video, but what is what is some real impact that we've been able to have as a church. And I think being able to share those stories truly inspires people. And so I think if you're just getting up there and you're just trying to get through the announcements, then I think you're doing a disservice. You're phoning it in. I always say, you never know who's in the room.
Mm.
You absolutely never know who's in the room. And so you have to treat every room like it's the last room you're going to be in. And so you give your best. Funny enough, I was speaking at an event, and one day the CEO called me and said, "Hey, what's the address of your church?" I was like, "Oh, well, gave him the address." He sent our church $100,000, and he's never been there before in his life.
Wow.
And so you're able to say, "Hey, this is what a stranger is doing." Man, that challenged me as a person to say, "Well, what are you going to do for the place that is investing the most in your family, praying for your family, helping your kids grow in their relationship?" So again, you're trying to pull as many authentic stories that isn't manipulation. You're not twisting people's arms, but you're really thinking about that 3 minutes. It's not just another Sunday. Sometimes, again, it's the Super Bowl. So every church I speak at, every organization I speak for, it's like I look at myself like a professional athlete in a sense of like somebody saved up money to be in the arena. And so this could be somebody's only Sunday. It could be their first Sunday. And I want to make sure, I hope it's me every single time. My favorite moment when I walk into a church that I've been to before is when somebody says, "Is it you today?" And I say, "Yeah." And they go, "Yes, I brought my brother. Yes, I brought my boss. Yes, my mom came." It's like, I'm your guy. And guess what? I've been preparing for them all week. I got your brother today. I got your boss today. I wrote this for them, with them in mind. It's like I'm maniacal when it comes to prep. And so even if it's 3 minutes, I'm thinking about that first time visitor. I'm thinking about the person that is reluctant to give. And I think the number one value system in my life is generosity. So when that's a true value of your own, you're able to actually have a lot of stories around that. So that's what goes into my prep for just 3 minutes of an offering.
So drilling down a little bit more on that, I guess my question is why? You're in your early 20s, you're not doing keynotes.
Yeah.
You get 3 minutes for an offering window. And I can see a lot
That's
of
right.
people saying, "Ryan, you know what? When I get paid lots of money to do a keynote for a company,
Yeah.
I'm going to be maniacal about my prep." But, our church has only got a few people in it, and it's just 3 minutes on Sunday. So, what was it that at a young age made you maniacal about prep when there was, quote, nothing on the line and you weren't even being paid?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a couple of things, if I'm being transparent and vulnerable. Number one, I felt like A, being a Christian, B, being African American, C, representing my family. I feel like I represent a lot. I take great pride in being a Christian in corporate America. I take great pride in the fact that if you give me a stage, if Reggie, if Andy, Rick Warren, John Maxwell, you name the different people that have given me opportunities, I want to make sure that I represent all of the people that I represent extremely well. And so I take it all seriously. You never know who's in the room. And so you give your best to every room and you treat everybody like they're somebody. But there's so many different NBA teams that have different ownership structures. There's one team who the owner who owns 1% of the team is actually an intern. His family is multi-billionaires, but he has 1% of the team. He's in his late 20s, and he's an intern for the organization. And the only people that know are the GM and the president. They are literally working with their owner every day, and they don't know it. It is literal undercover boss because he wanted to learn the organization from the ground up. And it's amazing how people treat him, and they don't know. And so I just tell everybody, treat everybody like they're somebody. Treat every opportunity like it's the opportunity. You never know. Like if I told you, hey, you're going to speak to a group of interns for this professional sports team, you would go, okay, cool, I guess. And it may not be a big deal to you. I'm going, no, if I'm you, I give my absolute best. It doesn't matter. Like on some level, it's a stewardship level. One day I'm going to stand before God and give an account for what I did with what he gave me. And so for me, no stone unturned. I want to give my absolute best to the best of my ability. It's not a grand slam every time I get a microphone, but is the effort always going to be there? 100%.
I could go in a number of different directions. I do want to ask about your parents. You know, your dad had that life-altering event. What happened with your dad? And then I'm curious about, you know, did your parents instill that in you young? Like what forged that? Because not everybody has that attitude coming into life.
I think there is a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit and an independence that I do have that maybe isn't all that normal. When my dad had a stroke when I was in the 5th grade, it did make me pretty independent. I didn't want my mom to have to worry about me.
Did he survive, your dad?
No, my dad passed away.
I'm sorry.
From the point that he had the first stroke, he lived another 18 years, had a second stroke, and then passed away shortly after that, about 8-9 years ago.
Sorry about that.
But from that point on, I got pretty independent. I wanted my mom to feel like, hey, don't worry about Ryan. You can worry about everybody else. You don't have to worry about dad. You're going to have to worry about my brothers, but you don't have to worry about me. And so I had very much a figure it out mentality.
So you kind of grew up fast?
Yeah. I mean, even going through counseling, they're like, when did you play? When was your PlayStation season? I'm like, I didn't have it. Like I went from 5th grade to like hustle, figure out life pretty fast. I remember we have another mutual friend, Jeremy DeWert, Rockville, Illinois.
Yeah. Oh, I love Jeremy. Yeah.
He was my youth pastor.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And still now I would consider a very close friend.
Rockford,
Illinois.
There you go.
I would skip my school lunch and go to his office and pick his brain. I just thought, man, he's doing something with his life, and I just admired him so much. And I thought I could kick rocks with these kids at school, or I could go sit with somebody whose office is literally 20 feet from our lunchroom, and he's going to add something to my life. And I would, after he would get done preaching, I would go and I say, hey, could I have your notes? And he would literally hand me his printed notes. By the way, he still uses Times New Roman font size 12, and just to throw him out there. But he would hand it to me, and that was how I learned sermon structure. I was in 7th grade going, oh, so this is okay. Well, how did he know that context? And so I had a front row seat to somebody that was pretty great and pretty driven. And so at that private school, there were doctors, lawyers, senators, and anytime I had an opportunity, if I was at a birthday party, I was in the corner talking to the dad. I really skipped childhood a little bit. Like now in my older age, I'm having to like play with my kids to like catch up to like childhood and just like be a kid sometimes. But I grew up pretty fast, and my parents were incredibly generous. My parents did not make a lot of money at all, but if they had $1, I mean, I used to sit next to my mom in church, and she would say, hey, you never let an offering plate go by you without giving something.
Wow.
My mom would put a quarter in my hand, and we would drop it in the bucket. And so that's what I learned from my parents in terms of just, I think, having the right heart when it comes to all of this stuff, and not knowing what the left hand and the right hand's doing. You just try to have a spirit of generosity. I definitely got that from my parents, but I don't think that they had all of the resources to know how to do that at a very high level. It wasn't until I got around people like John Maxwell or a Rick Warren that I saw it on a much larger scale. And so my perspective, my worldview continued to get bigger and bigger in terms of, wait, how can we make an even bigger impact when it comes to generosity and just how we show up in the world?
Boy, lots of different directions we could go in here. One of the things, I mean, not to make this all about who we know, but when you were talking about your level of preparation and maniacal preparation when you were younger and to this day, it reminds me so much of John Acuff. You know John.
John's great.
John's the same way. John, like, he may have done a keynote on a book he wrote 3 years ago 47 times. He's still on client calls. He's prepping.
Of course.
Well, you say of course. But a lot of people, I mean,
they don't do that.
Not everybody does that. When you've arrived, and, you know, my guess is you're turning down a lot of people. There's more demand than there is supply, Ryan.
Sure.
And so when that's happening, your prep, you're on client calls for every single call you have. Why have you and how have you kept that same level of maniacal prep, even though you're, quote, now successful and arguably one of the most sought after speakers in the leadership space these days?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the reality is I don't think you can arrive. That's my personal belief because the landscape of business and leadership is constantly changing.
Yeah.
And if you lose your finger on the pulse of what's happening in an organization, you will not be an effective communicator. And so while I have a series of questions that I ask every client, their answers really determine how I communicate. For example, I was speaking for a healthcare system and I said, hey, what's the common lingo that you guys use? Well, why is that important? Well, here's what they said. They said, oh, we're really glad you asked. We had a shift in leadership. And so we actually don't call the people in our hospitals patients anymore. We call them customers. Whoa. The reason is because when we said patients, it made our doctors and nurses the center of our business. But once we started calling the people in our hospitals customers, it made them the center of our business. So now we start using words like hospitality and customer service. So when you talk to our staff, make sure you don't use the word patients.
Well, you never would have known that. Holy
and that's what
cow.
I tell speakers all the time. Like, you don't do pre-event call? Like, you won't know this information if you don't. So that's why I do it every time, because the other interesting thing is every industry, every company has acronyms that they use that no one else in the world uses. No one knows what you're talking about. They've got insider language. The pre-event calls allows you to get in on the inside. And so I remember the first time I was speaking for Chick-fil-A and they say, hey, you know, we are a QSR. I said, what's a QSR? And they all started laughing. And I said, what's so funny? They go, why in the world would you know that? We just say QSR all the time. They are a quick serve restaurant, which is what differentiates them.
Don't call them fast food. That's right.
From McDonald's. You know, it's like, I would have never known that. I have a tab on my notes of just acronyms I've learned over the last 3 years. And what I've gotten is way smarter because I actually know what they're talking about. So I think that's why it's important to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with them. I have another client right now who I'm understanding how tariffs impact his business and his leadership. If I do a pre-event call, how would I know that? I would just go, oh, they're talking about tariffs in the news. I don't know what that means. No, I know what that means. And so I understand some of the leadership challenges that they're having. Doesn't mean I'm an expert on tariffs or politics, but it does mean I have an understanding of what they're up against in Q1, in Q2, and I can speak with a level of confidence on a stage to be able to address challenges that they're going to have to face and lead through. I'm always asking the question, what's the biggest challenge your audience has? And the answers continue to vary. So I'm able to shape messaging around what's going on with them. Earlier today, they have the president always has his favorite Wayne Gretzky quote. I'm putting it in the keynote. And everyone's going to laugh. And the inside joke is he says that he came up with it and everybody knows that it's Wayne Gretzky. So it's going to say President Mark / maybe Wayne Gretzky. And everyone's going to laugh. And it's like, and what's going to happen in that moment? Everyone in that room, those 1,000 people are going to go, we like this guy.
Yeah, and you know what? It's very easy to come in with your slide deck that you gave 28 times before and not customize it.
Yeah, I try to customize it as much as I possibly can. Because I just think and to me, that's the difference between a good communicator and an effective communicator. I don't think I'm great. I think I'm effective because I'm listening on these calls. I'm taking copious notes. And then we are doing our best to customize it in a way that adds value to that room. It's not about me. It's not about my latest book. It's about what I can give to the room. And I think when you do that, I think you're going to get invited back. There's going to be a likability factor, I think, in an appreciation to say, okay, this was the theme of the event. And he weaved it into his entire talk. He still said everything he normally would say, but he said it in a way that was in line with all of the things that we've been trying to communicate as a company. It's the same thing in church. When I speak in church, I listen to the previous 3 weekends. And I try to quote at least one thing from each week in that series. To say, hey, I'm not just here just to do my talk. It's going, hey, we've been in a series, we've been in a collection of talks, and here are the things that we've been talking about. And oh, by the way, from week 2, let me tell you what was impactful to me. I haven't even gotten into my sermon, and the pastor's going, I'd have this guy back anytime. I haven't unpacked a verse. I hadn't even introduced myself. It's like, no, you're doing homework. I can't tell you how many times I preached at a church, and the small groups pastor has emailed me and said, dude, nobody ever tells people to go to our website.
Wow.
Like you highlighted us. I've had marriage ministries reach out to me, and I go, hey, did you guys? There's one church I speak at. They have they have a counseling center where independent counseling contractors can office out of there, and they offer counseling to the entire church of 15,000 for free. I said, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. So I talked about it when I preached. They were like, nobody ever talks about us. I was like, why not? It's just amazing. They're like, you highlight, like, it's like you studied our website. It's like you did your homework. Again, we keep using the word maniacal, but it's like, man, I think it's the way. It's the effective way of connecting with your audience and what's happening there. And it feels seamless. You don't want to be a disruption. You don't want it to be like, oh, Ryan was here. Okay, now we're going to go back to our regularly scheduled programming. It's just like, no, he was a part of our regular scheduled programming, and it fit nicely, and we can actually pick up on this next week. So I'll say, hey, what's happening next week? I'll say, oh, we're starting a brand new series. I'll say, amen. Hey, join us next week as we kick off our next series on Romans. Have a great weekend. So all of these little things, it's the prep of, yes, if it's a sermon, obviously you're praying and trying to hear from God and be able to put something together that you think is going to help someone grow closer to the Lord. But I think really diving into doing your research on who they are, the people that go to their church, I think is what can really help you be an effective communicator.
I was going to say, nuance this as you want, but I think what I'm hearing you say, it's one thing, and we've all been around speakers like this, and maybe I've been that speaker sometimes. Sure. It's easy to go, here I am, here I am. Mm-hmm. Or what I hear you saying is, there you are. I see 100%. You. I see you.
Absolutely.
Another way is, I'm the hero. Here I am on stage. I'm the guy with the microphone. Or sure. You're the hero. You're the organization. You're the people. I'm here to serve.
Yeah.
Is that a big pivot that you see, that you're trying to embrace?
I think so. I think that the more you can serve people, I think the more you'll always be in business. The more you can show up to say, hey, we talked about this. I got a new book coming out. It's like, okay, well, do we do a podcast on the book or do we do a podcast on what's going to add the most value to your listeners?
Well, they already got a masterclass 35 minutes in that you're not going to get anywhere else. That's amazing.
So to me, it's just like, I'm getting ready to do John Maxwell's Day to Grow. And they said, hey, Ryan, you're going to do your new book, How to Work with Complicated People. I said, well, what's the goal of of that actual room. What are you trying to get them to do at Day to Grow? They said, well, we're actually trying to get people to get certified with the John Maxwell certification to be a coach. I said, well, I'm going to be honest. I don't think How to Work with Complicated People does that as well as maybe something that I need to write brand new. Well, my book is with John Maxwell Publishing. We're incentivized to do this book. And I said, yes, but I think we need to pivot. I don't think it serves the room well. It's like, well, does it serve you? I was like, dude, my book will be fine. But will the people be fine? And so we wrote a brand new talk just for that room, and we sent it to the team, and they all went, dude, this is really good.
Excellent.
And the reason it's really good is because it serves the room well. Not because it's just funny. Not because it's because it serves the room well. Well, I'm also doing some high capacity leader thing that's connected to the John Maxwell thing a couple hours before. And they say, hey, you're going to do How to Work with Complicated People. And so I called my friend Chad Johnson, who I think you know as well. I said, hey, do you think the biggest problem that room has for high capacity leaders is working with complicated people? I realize it's a problem for a lot of people, but I don't know that it's a problem for that room. He said, no, that's probably a good call. And so we pivoted twice. So we're bringing 2 new talks to that event because we're trying to serve the people in the room. If you're trying to serve yourself, people can feel it. It's a weird pivot. It's like we're talking about one thing, and the next thing you know, it's like, oh, and now we're just trying to sell a book. It's just like, no, we're not trying to sell books. We're trying to help people. We're trying to serve people. Having done Orange for a number of years, they always send a theme. And I love working with leaders to say, hey, what can we craft together to serve the room well? If it's something that I've written in a book recently and it coincides well, phenomenal.
Bonus points. Yeah.
But if it doesn't, that doesn't mean that we can't still serve the room well. Here's what I've learned. If you serve the room well, they'll go and buy your book.
That is my theory. It's like if it's a great interview, and that's why I'm trying not to turn this into like a book cast, is if they're going, wow, Ryan's a great dude. I bet he has something to say. What's his book called? Complicated People or something like that? I'm going to go buy it. As opposed to, well, in chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3.
Absolutely.
When you have your hundreds of client calls, as you have over the last few years, you mentioned, you asked them, what's the worst speaker? You gave us one clue. What are some of the other recurring themes you hear about what makes for a bad experience with a speaker?
Anything gimmicky.
What does that mean?
Yeah, when they feel like it's a gimmick. In other words, where they're trying to solicit a specific response from the crowd. I'm trying to make you cry, and so let me bring my child out on the stage and tell this very, very sad story. And now it's time for me to do this thing. You can just feel it. Are some things that have been shared. Inappropriate language. They just didn't read the room. It could be anything from a crude joke or just most what I hear is disconnection, not a bad talk. It is they just did their talk and then they just left. You know, there wasn't a real connection point that made our people feel like they could take on the world or be better humans or be better leaders. Another thing that they wouldn't say is the worst, but they would say is a knock on some other speakers is no real practical takeaways. They feel good in the moment, but if you say, hey, what'd they talk about? You'd go, I don't know.
Yeah. What are you supposed to do with it?
Yeah. So I think having that lasting impact is something that is important. Besides that, I mean, I think it's mostly around how they treated people pre-event call, even down to I won't name the speaker, but he is one of the most popular speakers in the country. And a friend, I asked that question, and I said, "Hey, who's the worst speaker you've ever heard?" And they said his name, and I was like, "Well, he's like really good." So that's very surprising. They said, "Yeah, he's very good. His team is not." His team is not. They take forever to get back to you. We never got the slides. He showed up 10 minutes before, and then he crushed it on the stage, but it was just like the overall experience wasn't a great overall customer service experience, even though he did a great job. And so it just makes you think it's more than just about what you prepare for the stage. It is that interaction, being able to, whether it's take pictures or make them feel like, man, before you ever step on the stage, he knows us. He's a friend of ours. He wants to help us. And I think that allows you to step onto the stage with a level of confidence of going, I know who these people are. I know what they do. I understand their leadership challenges. And I believe that I've written some content that I believe is going to add value to their life.
How do you know, or how do you evaluate whether you succeeded in a talk or whether you missed? And I'm sure you've had some misses. We all do, right? You get enough reps.
I missed a couple days ago. No question about it.
What happened?
Oh, yeah.
What happened, dude?
I misread the audience.
Oh.
Yeah, I misread the audience, and our pre-event call was a phone call, not a Zoom call. It was a last-minute engagement, and I thought I had it dialed in, but I didn't, and I just chose, I would say, half of the wrong content. Now, granted, they would say, I had people message me after, oh my gosh, best talk I've ever heard, but I felt like I wasn't dialed into their daily challenges like I thought I was. Sometimes I've got like a leadership hat on that I'm stepping into, and then you get on stage and you go, wait, are you leaders? Or are you just salespeople? You just sell a bunch of stuff. And you're a high performer, you're a high capacity person, but you're really a solopreneur. You don't actually work with people. You don't. And so you can have those moments live. You're on stage, you're like, actually, I got to pivot. But then you're like, but slide 13 literally says next level leadership requires a next level calendar. And you're like, but they're not a leader. So you're like, how am I going to pivot that? So it was one of those where it was like, man, I wish I could have had more time to tweak my deck and ask more questions. And I thought I had it dialed in, but I didn't. Luckily, I spoke to a smaller group of people, and then I'm doing a second event for them where there's going to be thousands. And now that I have it dialed in, the talk with the thousands will be a whole lot better, just because I have a better understanding of who they are and what they do every day.
How do you know it worked? How do you know it connected? What criteria do you use?
I think effective communication is audience reading. It's understanding. There's lots of cues you can pick up on. One is people can pick up their phone and take a picture of a slide, so you know, oh, that resonates with them. That really touched either on a pain point or something that they want to remember. Sometimes it's them putting their head down and taking a note. Sometimes I can see, oh, they haven't put their head down and taken a note in 10 minutes, which means they're not learning. They're in auto. So it's like, oh, I've got to shift. I have to make some adjustments now because they're here to learn. They're not here just to be entertained. So sometimes I can see that a story is going too long. And so in that moment, I have to bring back, okay, what's the point again? Why are we here? What are we talking about? And making sure that they have some of those practical takeaways, because sometimes I'm just having fun, and you get lost a little bit. You go,
or they're laughing, and then you just keep going.
Yeah. You're on a roll. You know, you're like, oh, this is going great, but then you're like, yeah, but they hadn't learned anything in a while. So you got to kind of rein it in and kind of understand those ebbs and flows. So you're reading the room. I'm also reading the leadership room. In other words, the people that brought me there. I'm looking at their body language to see if because they've actually got a little bit of a better temperature because they know their people. So I can see them like looking and checking in, and so you're able to dial in on that. But inevitably, I try not to get too high or too low when it comes to those events. I'm fortunate enough to do so many that I did 4 this past weekend. I could give a grade for each one, but if I get too high or too low. I mean, I've got more events this weekend.
Yeah.
So it's, and then I've got 2 next week, and then I've got 6 the week after that. So it's like you're moving along so much that you don't want to get too high or too low. You want to say, all right, how can I get better from each keynote? I actually learned that from Eaglebrook Church. Eaglebrook Church, we talked about this before we got on the recording. They're probably one of the largest churches in the world that doesn't want to be known as one of the largest churches.
They fly under the radar, and they're amazing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They're remarkable. And I was the teaching pastor there for a number of years. Now I just go back a couple of times a year. And my best friends live in Minnesota. I went to school in Minnesota. So it's a love getting to go back and be with them. They do something very interesting. You write out a manuscript for the weekend. It's reviewed by a number of pastors, and they send you feedback on what they believe is good, funny, and hey, I actually think this won't work. Hey, I actually think this is long. Hey, I actually don't even think you need point number 3. You kind of already made it in point number 2. And so they're giving you perspective long before you ever hit the stage. One time I had there was a lake that I went to in college. Apparently it had an offensive Indian name that during COVID, there was a protest over changing the name of the lake, and it got changed. I didn't know that. So I had that in the sermon. They're like, if you say that, we're going to have protesters at our front door. I would know that. I live in Dallas. So I'm glad I got that feedback before I got on stage and ended up on the news. So you get that feedback before. Then after first service, you have a debrief with the worship team, comms department, campus pastors, senior pastor, executives, and you discuss the whole service, including the message. And it's mostly, hey, here's what I think was really good. Here's what I think actually should go on plasma or go on the screen. You said it out loud, but it wasn't on the screen. Dude, I think that's a takeaway. Hey, here's some things that I would adjust. And I'm telling you, the first time I did it, I thought, who are you guys to tell me?
There is a bit of humility involved there. Yeah.
But man, once I sat in it, because they told me it was coming. They're like, hey, we have a feedback culture. I'm like, well, I don't know if I like your feedback culture. Now I get mad when I don't get it. I'll send my sermon to other pastors and they're like, why are you sending me your sermon? So you can read it and tell me what you think. They're like, I mean, it's good. I'm like, oh, okay. So Eaglebrook spoiled me a little bit because they gave me so much feedback that it was just so helpful, and it helped me even refine my communication even more. So now with my corporate clients, I send them my full deck a month in advance with presenter notes. There's no surprises. I want you to see where I'm going with this. And I can't tell how many emails I've gotten. Hey, just got your deck. I so appreciate your notes. Man, you really were paying attention on our call. Yeah, I was. Call is crazy. And then they're able to say, hey, we don't actually do this anymore. We know you looked this up on our website, but we actually changed our website in the time between our pre-event call and the time you sent our deck. So we're actually changing that value system. So you don't actually have to hit on that point. Hey, thank you so much. You wouldn't know if you weren't in a relationship and in connection with them. And so anyway, so I think that's what's really important for me whenever I'm, trying to dial in with the client beforehand.
So Ryan, reps help a lot. What else are you
100%.
doing intentionally to grow your leadership? Because there's using your gift, and you're clearly a gifted communicator. You prep like crazy, maniacal prep. Mm-hmm. But what are you doing to like become a master at what you do? Who are you learning from? How are you learning? What are some of the rhythms, habits, disciplines where you're like, I'm going to elevate my game. I'm going to pull more out of me or learn a foreign skill set so I can get better at this? I'm curious because you take your craft really seriously.
So there's quite a few social media influencers that I follow and watch and just see how they essentially connect.
Feel free to drop some names and give us some case studies.
Yeah, I mean, Gary Vee's one of them. He cusses a lot, but he's very effective in how he connects.
What do you appreciate about Gary Vee?
Honesty. He cuts through the fluff really, really fast. He understands his audience. He is a consistent learner.
And is always interacting with them. Always like Q&A on the street, raw, unedited.
Always.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to learn there. I think that there's some value in, again, I'm maniacal about social media. I'm maniacal about 60 minutes. I'm maniacal about 60 seconds. I think it all matters because you have the opportunity to go on somebody's phone that has never met you before in their life. It's an amazing time to be alive. So there's lots of people that are like, man, I'm trying to get on the stage. I'm like, try to get on the screen. It's easier, way easier. And so I think being able to see who's been effective with their social media presence. I think Life Church Memphis is another great example of how they just leverage their social media for their overall audience. Alex Hermosi is a guy that I've watched for a number of years. I think it's John Maxwell's team that's doing it, but I think how they leverage his content is done really, really well. I'm trying to think of a few others. Mel Robbins is another one. She is
number one podcast in the world this year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So hers is obviously podcast heavy for that reason. But even before that, I was amazed by how, one day she said, hey, I had a really rough meeting. And so I just had to take a walk. And I thought, maybe you're having a rough day too. So let's take the walk together. Hey, what if we took a couple deep breaths together? Let's do it on 3. 1, 2, 3. I feel better. Do you? That was the whole video. And I just thought, man, there's a level of authenticity there that and it wasn't a dialed up video. It wasn't like a super nice video, but it was an honest video. So it's people like that I love to glean from and to go, man, that was an impactful 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. And I'm still talking about it. I think she did it 2 years ago. And I've got it dang near memorized. Like, that's crazy. So it had an impact on me and it made me go, oh man, where could I be a little bit more raw and real in what I create? So those are a couple of people that I think as you are refining your skill, if you're writing every day, whether it's for social media, and social media is just crazy because you have so many different audiences. I think one of the missing pieces for especially people in the church is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
There's so many pastors that aren't on LinkedIn. And I say, hey, do you want to reach, people in the marketplace or in corporate America? They're like, yeah, I'd love to. I go, dude, you got plenty of great content. Why aren't you putting it on LinkedIn? And there could be a little bit of an intimidation there, but we've designated quite a bit of our business resources into social media, specifically LinkedIn, to be able to say, hey, here's an audience that we really want to impact and add value to their lives. And so we've got a clip. The other day I was doing Q&A and it was a healthcare clip. So it's not a clip that I would put on Instagram for everybody, but we're going to leverage it on LinkedIn to say, dear healthcare professionals, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for doing a very thankless job. And your job has been harder than most people know. And I was doing a Q&A the other day and I thought of you. Here you go. So it's trying new things every single day and just not getting comfortable in that. And then even just learning how the ad space works and being able to target specific audiences to be able to amplify impact is absolutely insane with what you can do in that. And so it's just another avenue of our business of saying, man, we can actually reach a lot of people and touch a lot of lives in some unique ways. So.
One of the things again, a decade is a long time and it's kind of overnight, but you dedicated, I think just going to look at my notes. Yeah. You dedicated your latest book to John Maxwell, whose name has come up a little bit. Yeah. You don't go from the 3-minute offering window to John Maxwell in 10 minutes, but, going back to where we started, Sam Collier introduces you to Reggie introduces you to Andy. And that's a pretty meteoric rise early on, but you're around some of the top people in business today. Talk to leaders. Like, I'd love to know in your context, how that worked And then what are some do's and don'ts in terms of connecting with other leaders? Because we've all been in green rooms where we've seen overeager people. It's like, oh, there's John Maxwell in the corner. I got to get over to him and blah, blah, blah. And you tell him your life story for 25 minutes. Probably not a best practice. No. And then other people just sit in the corner waiting for it to happen. I wonder when John Maxwell's going to reach out to me. That's probably not going to happen. So what is the, like, how have you approached it? And then what are some do's and don'ts in that field about connecting with people?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think there's, and I have to do this every day. I don't know that it's ever going to go away. I think we all have to check our motives.
Yes.
When it comes to who we're connecting with.
I'm a lot older than you. It never goes away, Ryan. Bad news for you, buddy. You're like, yeah,
it's never going to go away.
No.
And so I think there is a daily of like, why am I reaching out to this person? And then even just as a believer, you have to ask yourself, am I putting my hope in this connection?
So wait, you just said, why am I reaching out to this person? So it's proactive, not just reactive on your part?
I think so. I think, or why do I want to connect with this person?
Okay, good question.
So bad,
yeah.
you know?
Why do I want to have this guest on my podcast? That's the question I have to ask myself.
And here's what's interesting, Carey. And again, we could go another hour just on this subject. We have a lot of friends / used to be friends / used to be idols, people we look up to, who we would have killed to have a conversation with, who aren't in ministry anymore.
That really pains me.
Who were a big deal, who we would have killed to be in a green room with 10 years ago, that today we would go, hey, brother, we're praying for you.
Yeah, no.
So
wish that wasn't true, but it is very true. Yeah.
And it's somewhat of a long list, Carey.
I know.
So you kind of just go, Lord, like, protect my heart, my motives, and help me be a person that just has that does the right thing for the right reason. So I think that's first. It's just checking our motives of, hey, are we walking into, call it a green room, to give or to get? I've just decided I want to be a giver. Like, if there's something I can add value to in this room, great. But at this point in my life, even if I get invited into a green room, I'm like, I don't know that I want to go into it unless I'm there to give to somebody. But it's like, I don't have to run to the front. I don't have to meet this person. And if in my line of work, if I happen to run into this person, if I happen to get to meet this person, I'd be happy to shake their hand and say, hey, thanks for all you do. But I think there needs to be a natural progression of perhaps somebody introducing you. I remember even just getting connected with John Maxwell for the first time. A guy that works for him is a guy named Chad Johnson. And my book publisher was like, hey, you need to reach out to Chad and see if John will have you on his podcast, or see if John will write the foreword to your book. And you need to get a blurb from all of these famous people that you know. And I was falling for that trap at the time. So I called Chad and I said, hey, man, you think I could be on John's podcast? And he said, Ryan, unfortunately, like, you're not there yet. And I said, you know what, Chad, thanks for telling me that. Like, I got work to do. And you just inspired me. Like, I get it. He goes, yeah, we kind of need more of a household name on the podcast. And I go, I get it. That's not where I'm at. And perhaps it's still not where I'm at. But a year later, post Disney, Chick-fil-A, Wells Fargo, Capital One, Chase Bank, it was like, hey, man. And we just kept talking on the phone. He'd be like, what did you do yesterday? Wait, you were where yesterday? I said, man, I'm just trying to do a good job wherever I'm at. And then I'll never forget, he went to John. He said, hey, it might be early, but I think we need to have Ryan at Day to Grow. This was a couple years ago, and they rolled the dice. And again, it went well because, again, I'm maniacal about prep and wanted to do a good job. But I think there is something about, I've been in John's orbit for a long time, but me and John had lunch for the first time last year. And it took a minute. He had to hear me speak probably 3 or 4 times before he went, okay, I think Ryan might be one of the best. And he even told me at lunch, he said, I knew you had one good talk. I just didn't know if you had 2.
That's a really perceptive point. Because some people only have one good talk.
Yeah, he said, I didn't know if you had 3. I didn't know if you had 4. He said, I've heard you speak a couple of times on a couple of different subjects, and they were equally good. That let me know, hey, you're on to something. I want to invest in you, and build even more of a relationship. And so he challenged me a couple years ago, just even when I had 2 minutes with him. He said, man, just try to get into the top 5% of authors and speakers. You know, he just challenged me to do that. He said, if you do that, you'd be fine. He goes, I'm in the top 1%, but he goes, but if you can get in the 5%, he goes, I think you could do really well. And I took that challenge very seriously. And so I thought, how do I write compelling books and compelling keynotes that would add that much value to people's lives? And so I think that there is a bit of, you've got work to do. Your work needs to be able to speak for itself. Secondly, I think your character and how you treat people needs to match. You need to have a high level of character and a high motor, I think, too, to be able to say, hey, I want to be really good at what I do. I don't want to be better than you or somebody else. I want to be the best that I possibly can be. I think when you do that, your gifts certainly can make room for you. It's how I got connected with Rick Warren. It's how I've gotten connected with professional athletes or professional sports teams. It's, hey, Ryan did a great job for us at our event. Hey, let me tell you about my friend Ryan. And oh, by the way, most people say Ryan's a great speaker, but let me just tell you, he's a great guy. That's actually more important to me than, oh, he's a great speaker.
Yep.
Like, no, when we met him, like, dude, our people just like who he, like, he's just like a real person. It's just like, yeah, I don't know what you're expecting, a robot to show up. Nevertheless,
no, but everybody, sometimes there's like diva syndrome, even in the church. Like there's diva syndrome. There's people who kind of have the entourage and all these demands and everything. And I agree. I think when the off stage reality is better than the on stage reality.
Sure.
That's great. So a lot of young leaders listening who are where you were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of big names, Andy Stanley, Rick Warren, John Maxwell.
Yeah.
You're meeting them for the first time. Advise those young leaders, do's and don'ts. What is a more relationally intelligent way, emotionally intelligent way to connect with someone who might be a hero versus some things you should definitely avoid?
I'm going to use this word again. I don't know if we're going to call this episode maniacal with Ryan Leak.
Oh, it's probably going to be in the title. Yeah.
Be maniacal in your prep. Be maniacal in your prep for somebody you want to meet. I have a John Maxwell tab on my iPhone of questions to ask him if I get 5 minutes with him or 2 hours. I've had that tab for 6 years.
Whoa. Long before you had a personal introduction?
Way before. Wow. Way before. If I knew he was going to be in town and I just so happened I thought, these are people you do not want to waste their time. If you get time with them, be prepared. So if you've got a list of people in your mind, you think, man, if one day, if I could just pick their brain, you better have a pretty good set of questions that if you get to ask one or if you get to ask 30, you are locked, loaded, and ready to go. That just signals to them that you are different from every other person that has met them.
Okay. I don't want to interrupt you.
Sure.
Can I just add a little bit of color to that? I agree. Sure. I have maniacally prepped for, I don't want to name names, but a few of the people that are now regulars on this podcast.
Sure.
I mean, I'll name one. The first time I had Seth Godin on,
I
prepped for 3 days. And I had
No
thought
question about it.
for years if I ever got to talk to Seth. And one of the reasons I think he came back is he's like, you were ready. And
100%.
What a joy. Now, I've also had this experience where somebody's waited a long time to meet me. They meet me and they talk about themselves or their situation for 15 or 20 minutes. And you're shaking your head. Do you want to comment on that? Because you're suggesting the opposite.
Absolutely. You got to think that they're dealing with the people like you 20 times a week. And so you do not want to waste a second of that time with them, trying to impress them with what you've done lately. I think one of the things that when I talk about maniacal, I'm talking, don't ask them questions they've already answered in their books.
Ooh.
So my last breakfast with John, I went through one, I read his latest book that had just come out 2 weeks prior. Number one. Number two, I went through all of the other ones and just kind of freshened up and went, hey, what were questions that I had when I went through this book? And being able to figure out what are some unique questions that he doesn't get asked every day.
What would an example of that be? Like John Maxwell, who has 472 books. What would a John Maxwell, like, you probably don't get this question very often, question? I see you're looking at your John Maxwell tab. I love this.
I'm like, where's my tab at? Let's see here.
Yeah.
John Maxwell. Okay. For example, one of the questions is, what did you care about 30 years ago that you could care less about today?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah, you're going, what could you care less about right now? You want to know what's so funny today? John Maxwell could care less about social media right now. It's interesting, isn't it?
That is.
Because it's in the world that we live in. You're like, it's everything. For him, he goes, it's nothing. He's never even logged in. So again, you start to think, okay, tell me, what do you care about? What do you?
Because it hasn't hindered his success. Yeah.
Not at all. And he has such a great team that it's still a part of his world, very much. And he's still having an impact there. But he's not thinking about it at all. Another question is, if there's one thing you could go back and unteach, what would it be?
Ooh. Wow.
Is there anything you used to believe about God that has changed in the last 10 years?
Yeah.
Because people's theology grows, What crucial conversations did you have to have with your wife and family to be able to make the impact that you've made?
I ask questions for a living. That is a great set of questions.
Yeah, I mean, I got a whole list, I just tried to dive into, a little bit of his world and some things that he is very much leadership focused and pulling examples from all around the globe that I have rarely heard him go the route of his kids and family and so on and so forth, and navigate some of the personal side of that, which is something that I think is more important than ever before.
Yeah.
So I have a similar trajectory, except I've got a 10-year-old basketball player and a 5-year-old basketball player that play 3 games a week. And so navigating that interesting tension is something that I have not heard him touch on a lot. So I wanted to double click on some of those things. Yeah.
So you show up prepared. You
100%.
Make it about the guest, not about you. You ask questions that nobody else would be asking. Any other do's and don'ts for meeting people who you've been longing to meet for a long time?
This might be a me thing. I don't know that it's a. I would tell everybody a don't. Pictures.
Mm-hmm.
You instantly go into a category of a fan.
Yeah.
Which there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that there is something about, there is a respect level, I think, of someone to say, hey, I'm not just fanboying right now. I'm not just fangirling right now. I think that there's a maturity in the sense of not, I'm too cool for a picture.
Yeah.
But I think there is a something of, hey, I value your time, and I realize that you may not even want to be taking a picture right now. You're taking a lot of pictures in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that there's a little bit of a sign of respect of being able to say, hey, I really value your time. I got one question.
Wow. Yes, that'd be another thing I would add, Ryan. Briefer than you want it to be.
Absolutely.
You be the guy.
Elevator pitch.
Yeah, elevator pitch. Take 1 minute, and if they want to give you 5, awesome. But don't be like the guy asking for 15 minutes when they only got 2 to give. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was with a guy last night. He was asking me all kinds of questions, and he was my driver at the event that I was at. It wasn't until he started asking me about how I pivoted from service 1 to service 2 that I went, okay, I could talk all day now.
What do you mean service 1 to service 2? What does that mean?
I did a message for
you pivoted
the
like
service.
The first service, second service. Okay,
yes,
got it.
First service to second
Yeah.
service. He said, "Man, your adjustments, dude. How did you do that?" And I'm like, "I could talk to you for an hour now.
Because
you've piqued my interest. You're now talking about something that I love talking about, and so." You're trying to get inside of their world in a way that you're thinking about, what do they love talking about? And how can I ask a question of something that I've seen, I've noticed something. Hey, I noticed you did this in chapter 12. The art, not even the content. I noticed that you went from this subject to this. Was that intentional? It's like, oh, you read my book. Like you read the book. You're really, really prepared, which means you know the content better than most people. It's like there is you can always tell if it's just a fan that just says, hey, will you sign my book, versus somebody that's like, no, I did my homework. I told you before we started the recording, I was like, dude, your team is just amazing, and how much you prepared, and it's just remarkable. You even think about when we got on and I said, hey, I love your book. You pivoted.
I lit up. That's great to hear, particularly an 8-year-old book. Yep.
But it's true. Does that make sense? So it's like it's prepped both ways to be able to say, hey, I want to honor your time. I don't take your podcast lightly. I don't take your audience lightly, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get to have this conversation. But it's a way of honoring the other person to be able to dive in to say, hey, I read the whole thing, and in light of reading the whole thing, you didn't cover this already. So can I double click on this piece?
Yeah.
You feel honored that they care about the work that you worked really hard to put together. And so I think there's a much larger capacity and a willingness to spend more time with that person. And people reach out all the time. Oh man, I'd love to pick your brain. Oh, I love to pick your brain. Oh, I love to pick your brain. Great. Here's 4 books. You read them, you can have my time.
And how many people ever do that? One person.
One guy stopped me at the gym, and he said, dude, if I ever got an hour with you, dude, I would love to pick your brain. I said, I'm gonna give you some homework. If you do it, you can have an hour.
He did it. Good for him.
He did it and came back with 20 questions.
No.
And I went, he
all
can have my time.
Let's go.
Anytime for free. It's like, I could just tell, like, you're a person that you have that it factor. The Craig Rochells of the world, the Andys, the Ricks, the Simon, you name it. Like, they can recognize those people like that. And so I think being well studied, whether you're meeting someone you've admired for a long time, or you're getting a microphone and getting ready to communicate in front of a bunch of people, I think there's something about just being prepared. I think there is a respect level that comes with that across the board.
Yeah. Success makes us more of who we already are, and also amplifies certain elements of our character, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Yes. What have you had to guard against as your platform has grown, your income has grown, your team has grown, and your success has grown?
Great question. I learned this from Rick Warren, actually. Rick, he said to me, I spent about 3 hours with Rick Warren out in California. And towards the end of the 3 hours, I said, Rick, tell me what you see. I'm just curious, like when you see me, what do you see? Are there concerns? What should I look out for? I'm wide open. And he said, Ryan, I'm not worried about your career at all. He said, a person like you, he goes, your career will take care of itself. He says, you have enough talent. Like you'll always just figure that out. He said, what won't take care of itself is your family. And he said, my biggest concern for you, not you personally, but people like you, is that your lifestyle is not good for you. I said, what do you mean? He said, first class, steak dinners, presidential suites, everyone treating you like a king, lights, camera, action, fog, intro videos, standing ovations. He said, your family can't compete with that. He said, your family can't compete with Elevation Church. Your family can't compete with Lakewood. Guess what? They can't compete with Saddleback. We have way too many people. You're going to lose. He said, so what I tell people like you is that whenever you go home, make sure you mow your own lawn because you need something to ground you. He said, when you go home, make sure you change your own diapers. And so we've got a really small backyard, and it was like super muddy and the sun wouldn't shine on it. So we turfed it so I can't mow my own lawn. But what I do is I mop my own floor.
Good for you.
And so my mop game is insane. If you saw my mop, you'd go, what in the AI is going on in your house? And how does it know what's this? It's amazing. But it's, and even my kids, my wife, like, what? You got home at 11 o'clock. Why are you mopping the floor? I go, I'm coming home. I'm coming back to I'm just a dad and a husband. And just.
You know what? I still mow my own lawn, and people ask me, why do you do that? We got a half acre. And well, it's a bit, I'm maniacal, but I think underneath that, I've never quite thought about it that way. Part of that is it's very grounding. I mowed my own lawn when I was a kid, my parents' lawn. Yep. You know, when we became homeowners, I mowed my lawn. It's the one, I still wash my own cars. Like, 100%. You know, I'll try to detail them unless they got really dirty, but I haven't paid for a detail in like 6 years. It's like, give me a Saturday morning and a bucket and a little bit of cleaner I got, and let's go. Yeah. Let's go, land. Let's make it shine. And like, absolutely. I love that stuff because I think you're right. My life has changed a lot, but it's so grounding. And Rick, I mean, what great advice. Yeah, I can promise you, Ryan, my wife is not impressed. She doesn't.
Could care less.
I mean, she is and she's not. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Like, come on. Yeah.
No, 100%. There's, Rick said something else too. He said, Ryan, none of us were made to be worshiped. He said only one guy was made for that. And his name is Jesus. And that, and sometimes when you're doing what we do at a high level, there is an admiration that you can kind of take, and you're like, whoa, I'm not made for this. You will crumble under too much. Let's call it what it is, worship.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is having things that ground you. I've got great friends too. I think I've got great friends with a high level of accountability that they know how much money I make. They know how much I give to make sure that I am doing that I keep a generous heart. I've got friends that fly private. I've got friends that fly Spirit, or some say, if you fly Spirit, you will soon be a Spirit. I got friends that fly Southwest Group B. I've I got friends that fly first class. So when you're sitting in first class, you're not getting too high or too low because you've got friends all around you that keep you down to earth. One of my buddies flew private to North Carolina, and he was outside taking a picture, and he felt really great. It was his first time in a private jet. And he said all of a sudden there was a shadow that just came over the entire plane. He's like, man, what in the world's going on? Did the clouds change? And he said it was Michael Jordan's plane.
There's always a bigger one.
And he said he went from like top of the world to like, you're a nobody. It's just like, dude, you know, I try not to get too high or too low. My friends keep me in a place of humility. And I think the other nice part too in the corporate speaking sector is the best speakers in corporate America aren't famous.
Yeah, you're right. It's that micro niche celebrity where I click on people on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, 100%. Millions and millions of followers. I have no idea who you are.
And some of them, like I could name somebody right now. They are a $50,000 a keynote speaker. They have 3,000 followers on Instagram, and they're remarkable. It's just like they're just out there, just kind of doing their job. And so, if she was but she'd have 1 million followers.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lesson.
But because she's just a normal human being that just does great work in corporate America, it's like there's not as much of a hero fame complex that comes with that. And so I think that while I've had a lot of success in the corporate space and in the church space, I think I've been in the right spaces. Honestly, I'm grateful for an Eaglebrook.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you get to speak to 30,000 people and it's like not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's like you really are showing up to serve people as best as you possibly can. And they've only even grown their social media because I got on it. They're like, we probably need to be doing a little bit more, but not like too much. But the way they just carry themselves, the humility has definitely
a lot of humility in that team and in their story.
Man, I'm grateful that I've been connected with those kinds of churches where it hasn't been an ego pump or anything of that nature, and very high character people that I'm around. And I would say, for example, Eaglebrook doesn't have a green room. It doesn't exist.
Nice.
I would say most of the churches I speak at don't have a green room. They have a room where the worship team sits before they go lead worship. But that's the room you would go in. Like, you don't have a private place like this, like, cool club thing.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't. So I think I've been protected, to be honest, in a sense, in that way. And I've also got an incredible family. My kids and beautiful wife definitely just keep me grounded and help me remember, man, what's actually most important in this life. And so I think I've been blessed with the surroundings and the right clients that have allowed me to stay humble, I would say. Because I mean, you're one completely different gig from thinking you're somebody. And fortunately enough, I've been able to be a part of a lot of Super Bowls that, like, I don't get too high, too low, but grateful for the opportunities that I am given.
Well, you do actually write books too. Your latest one is called How to Work with Complicated People.
That's right.
How many books so far, Ryan?
This is my third official published book. I've written a bunch of other books that we like did just like at my church, but these are like, as far as like legit books. This would be the third. So we had Leveling Up, which was my previous book, and the one before that was Chasing Failure.
Yeah. Tell me the best place for people to connect with you online these days. Where are you most active? Where can they find you?
RyanLeak.com has all things Ryan Leak. Just revamped my own podcast. Instagram, I'm pretty active on. LinkedIn, I'm very active on as well. Threads, Twitter, a little bit of TikTok. That's a little bit of a different audience that we're just now beginning to ask ourselves, is that the place we want to add the most value? But we've definitely got our content there, but I don't think it's the right content.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out
for
TikTok
another day.
too. So
it's
a challenge.
But yeah, RyanLeak.com, Instagram, those are all of the places that you can find me.
Ryan, I feel like this has been a masterclass. I want to thank you so much. I barely touched any of the questions I sent you. That's often a very good sign.
Yeah. No, that's great. Maybe we'll come back in a couple months and get to those questions.
Exactly.
They're really great questions too. So
thank you, Ryan. I so appreciate it.
My pleasure.